Welcome and good afternoon, everybody, to APNM's fifth virtual town hall event, Take Action for Animals, an update on the legislative session and the bills that impact animals. I'm Dorothy Hutchinson, the Chief Development Officer for the organization, and I think that so many of you let us know that this is an important topic to you and that you're interested in getting an inside view on our work, and in this case, an update on the session with regards to Roxy's law to restrict traps, snares, and poisons on public lands and other bills from our Chief Government Affairs Officer, Jessica Johnson. With me today also is Isabel Slater. She's APNM's Major Gift Officer. And all right, so from there, I'm super excited to introduce you to our wonderful speaker this afternoon, Animal Protection of New Mexico's Chief Government Affairs Officer, Jessica Johnson, who's been with the organization for over 5 years. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, who will get us started and walk us through today's presentation. We'll take it from here, Jessica.
Thank you, Dorothy, and thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon. It is really great to have a chance to take a break from the grueling work of the legislative session and just kind of reflect on where we are at, share information with you all, hopefully answer any questions that you have, and talk about some next steps on where we go from here and how we can work together to pass some really important legislation to protect animals in this legislative session. About a year ago today, many of us were still able to see each other in person. This is a picture from our 2020 Animal Protection Day, our lobby day that we do every 1 or 2 years, where we try to get a critical mass of grassroots advocates like yourselves to come to the state capitol and make your voices heard, meet directly with your state legislators or their staff to talk about the bills that the legislature is considering. And I just want to say that I really miss it. It has been a very strange and very challenging legislative session in many respects. But one of the biggest side effects of the pandemic and this virtual legislative session is that there isn't a chance to sort of see each other's faces and talk in person and hug and cry together and lament the difficulties of advocating for legislation in this state for animals. And but I'm glad that there's at least this opportunity to talk with you over this Zoom webinar about what's going on and keeping you up to date. I also very much miss the therapy dogs that you see there on your screen. I could really use some additional dog therapy. My dogs are doing a good job of that, but the more the merrier, I say. So with this legislative session, we have a slate of bills that we have positions on. Some of it has come directly from our work and our direction from the beginning, or we've been involved in the development of the bills. And then there are other bills that are really being led by other advocates or organizations, and then we are able to lend our support to those bills. And then, of course, there are always some bills that pop up that we consider to be anti-animal bills because they would make things worse for the welfare and the rights of animals in our state. So just to kind of do a quick rundown of kind of the big bills that we have positions on, which is on your screen right now. And then throughout the rest of the presentation, I'm going to touch on a little bit more deeply on the 4 priority policy bills that you see up there at the top, and then answer your questions about anything that you see here or anything that's going on at the end of the presentation. So it's probably no surprise to you that one of the biggest priorities we have this year is the bill to restrict traps, snares, and poisons on public lands. That's at the top of the list, Senate Bill 32, called the Wildlife Conservation and Public Safety Act, otherwise known as Roxy's Law. That is a bill that we have been working on for almost a decade. And the issue itself has been around for several decades. And we know many of you who are tuning in, I'm seeing your names, you've been around working on this issue too for many, many, many years. But there's a lot of momentum and a lot of hope for this year. I'm really cautiously excited, and we'll get more into it later. And then there's some newer bills. So Senate Bill 347 is a new bill. It's the Confinement of Egg-Laying Hens Act, or you might hear us refer to it as the Cage-Free Egg or the Cage-Free Hen Bill. Senate Bill 385 is a new iteration of a bill that's kind of been working its way through the process over many years, but it kind of has a little bit of a facelift because we've been able to provide some input based on a lot of really important work on wild horse issues that we've been directly involved in over the last 2 years. Senate Bill 312 is kind of new, but kind of not. It's a very large bill with multiple pieces. Some of those pieces we have worked on individually to support. So there's some familiar changes in there, and I'll talk more about that later. Those are the 4 policy bills that we are pushing hard on. Senate Bill 407 is also an appropriation, so some money dedicated from the state budget to the Horse Shelter Rescue Fund, which is a fund that's operated by the Livestock Board, which oversees all of the horse shelters, the licensed horse shelters in our state. And those funds help them feed and take care of the horses that are in their care. They're doing really important life-saving work, and we really want to support that. And the horse shelters in our state don't really have the regular financial support from the state or even localities that a lot of our dog and cat shelters have. So that's why this is really important. Some other bills that we are supporting, House Bill 51 is known as the Environmental Database Act. This is kind of a good governance bill. There's data that's collected across multiple state agencies, including the Environment Department, the Natural Resources Department, the Department of Game and Fish, but it's not necessarily easy to access. So this bill would create a centralized, searchable public database where people can find information, including about endangered species and habitat status. So that's going to be a really great step forward for our state. Senate Bill 103, restricting the use of neonicotinoid pesticides, does exactly what it says. It provides some additional restrictions on the use of these particular pesticides that you've probably heard about before. These are the pesticides that are really well known to be connected with the dramatic reduction in our pollinator species numbers. So bees, especially butterflies, other animals that we really rely on as pollinators in our ecosystems. There's, a lot that is contributing to that, including climate change, but a big component is these toxic pesticides. And so this would help to reduce the amount of those pesticides that we're using here in New Mexico. Our list of opposed bills is thankfully pretty short. There hasn't been too many attacks on animals during this legislative session, but there have been a few. So House Joint Resolution 5 and House Joint Resolution 8 were both different versions of the same sort of constitutional amendment that would create a right to hunt, or a right to hunt and harvest wildlife in our state constitution. This is something where it was really interesting because it wasn't just animal and environmental groups that were opposing this bill. It was also some of the biggest hunting advocacy groups who all kind of agreed that, hunting, killing, managing our wildlife, the way that people do this and the way the public participates in that is a privilege in a way that should be completely managed and regulated, it should not be listed as a fundamental right, like our right to free speech and our right to freedom of religion. One of the versions also made it really clear that its intent was to make lethal management the first choice of the state when it comes to wildlife management, which would have terrible impacts on animals and also doesn't make sense when you're talking about endangered and threatened species. One of the sponsors also made it really clear. He basically stated that his intention was to try to pass this constitutional amendment in order to prevent the passage of Roxy's Law, the bill to ban traps, snares, and poisons on public lands. So he didn't keep that a secret, and thankfully both of those measures were killed in their first committee. So those will not be moving forward. The last bullet point there, a couple of House bills and a Senate bill, they do different things, and they're all somewhat related to creating more gambling opportunities around horse racing. And this is an issue that, you know, we've been working on and monitoring for many years. And a couple of years ago, you know, really made attempts to try to work with or work on the State Racing Commission in order to make sure that improvements were being made for race horses. There's a serious problem with using drugs and medication to dope horses throughout their lives, but especially on race days, and it leads to really catastrophic injuries and death rates on the track. So we've made those attempts to kind of help the industry at least take some positive steps forward, and those efforts have been scorned. And so at this point, we feel obligated to say, you know what, we have to oppose racetracks' measures to try to increase their profits through more gambling, you know, at least until they start to seriously address these problems. So the first one listed there, House Bill 101, that won't be moving forward. It had a very contentious committee hearing in its first committee. And then the sponsor at the end just withdrew it from a vote in committee, so that won't be moving forward. House Bill 199 did have one hearing and it passed, but it's kind of stalled out, you know, as we've been communicating with legislators about our reasonings for opposing the bill. We're hopeful that maybe the other bills won't move forward as well. Okay, so let's get into some of the details. So Senate Bill 32, this is the trapping bill. Our wonderful sponsors are Senator Bobby Gonzalez, who was actually the lead sponsor of this bill when he was in the House starting in 2013 and also in 2015. So he has really stuck by this issue, and we're so grateful to him. And he came to this issue because one of his constituents had a terrible experience with their dog getting caught in a trap. One of them was a child, and as she was trying to release her dog, her dog was frantic and bit her. And so this was, you know, a really traumatic experience. And Senator Gonzalez felt moved to carry this issue forward. This year, he is joined by a new senator, Brenda McKenna, from Corrales. And then we have also as co-sponsors the House sponsors of the bill from 2019. So those are Representative Matthew McQueen and Representative Christine Chandler. A really, really outstanding team of sponsors on this bill. I don't think I could have picked a better team of sponsors. So this bill sets a prohibition on these devices that you can see listed there. It applies to traps, including cage traps. It applies to snares, and it applies to wildlife poisons. The bill only applies to public land, and public land is a defined term in the bill. And you can read the description there. It does not include private land. It does not include tribal land or the inside of structures that might be built on public land. There's also a list of exemptions. Some of these are relatively common. You'll find them in other states that have banned some or all of these devices. You know, it's been an effort to work on these over the past decade. I know many of us would just prefer that it's just a ban, period. And it, you know, we wish it applied to private land too, you know, and so it's been a process of trying to work with stakeholders, and especially the legislators that we want to be able to support a solid step forward. And so this is where we have landed. And there has been a lot of support for this, which is why we're very hopeful this year. It does establish misdemeanor penalties for persons who violate the law, and it takes effect on April 1st of next year. Leading up to the session, there was a lot of really great media coverage of some not so great incidents that took place on public land. People's dogs being caught in leg hold traps, just finding a loose dog in the forest caught in a leg hold trap. One New Mexican found a pile of skinned coyotes just left out next to a path, and the coyotes, you could see on their ankles and their toes that there were marks of where a leg hold trap had held them or injured them. And so this created a lot of really great awareness going into the legislative session. We also have had years of support from the Albuquerque Journal, whose editorial board has really championed the idea that, you know, this is really time for something, this is something that it's time for New Mexico to do. And, you know, you can see from this excerpt from an editorial late last year, you know, they're comparing it to really important progress that we've already made in the state, like banning cockfighting, banning horse tripping events, banning coyote killing contests, which we did just a couple years ago. Banning traps on our public lands is really the next step. We also have some great support from our state land commissioner that oversees 9 million acres of state trust land. This is a bill that she supported when she was a state representative several years ago. And so now, as a state land commissioner, she has been very open about how she sees should be the right way to manage our lands where our wildlife is. And so she supports this bill. So earlier last year, the Game Commission and the Department of Game and Fish did make some regulatory changes to the rules around trapping. And they made a couple of small closures. They increased setbacks from certain areas like trailheads. So like trapping would have to be at least a half mile away from a trailhead. And they also required for the first time that people that want a trapping license have to go through a mandatory trapper education course. And the idea was that this, you know, getting all this done and implementing it is going to reduce the number of conflicts between the public and trapping. You know, they expected that they would hear fewer stories about people complaining about having a terrible experience with their animal or finding animals caught in traps. All of those regulations went into effect in last year. So it's been in effect during this trapping season, which started November 1st last year, and it goes through March this year. What we have seen is a larger number of incidents being reported this trapping season than possibly ever before, at least, you know, compared to the last 5 years. I know that for sure. Why is that the case? It's hard to say. It's possible that during the pandemic, there has been an increase in people going out and enjoying our public lands, you know, taking a hike outside, is one of the few safe things that people can do outside of their homes. It's also possible that there's just more awareness now, a little bit more awareness about who you can even contact if you have a bad experience. What we do know still is that there are incidents happening all the time that we never hear about because there isn't a well-publicized formal reporting process for people to share this information about what they experienced. They just have to happen to know that maybe there's some organizations in the state, or maybe they Google to find out, who they can talk to about what just happened. You can see from the list of incidents, it's happened all over the state. It's included, one of the reports even came from a hunter, a quail hunter who was out on a hunt, and his pointer that he brought with him got caught in a leg hold trap. It includes, people who live in rural areas where their dogs are disappearing outside their home. You'll see incident number 11. During one of the blizzards in late January, a family's dog disappeared and was out all night, overnight, and they only found her the next morning. She had broken loose from a neck snare that was still attached and choking her neck. And they were thankfully able to bring her home and cut the snare open before she died. So she did survive the incident. But there's just so much evidence that we see that the regulations that the Department of Game and Fish put in place to try to prevent this stuff from happening absolutely did not work. And so, all of the advocates and the bill sponsors feel very grounded in the fact that, this bill is the right direction for the state to take now. Because as New Mexico continues to grow, we're trying to bolster our outdoor recreation economy, and tourism will be really important once we get on the other side of this COVID pandemic. The last thing we need is for that to be hampered by really terrible and cruel experiences on our public lands. One of the questions that I see from Ralph is, why is the penalty only a misdemeanor and not a felony? It's a good question, Ralph. It is challenging to fight for felony penalties sometimes. We're working within the context of New Mexico criminal justice, which I think needs a lot of work overall. In order to make sure that we've got enough of a penalty that the prohibition works, we think that the misdemeanor level will handle it, and it will be something that legislators feel more comfortable about supporting without feeling like they're doing something that's going to just increase the prison industrial complex, if that makes sense. But thank you for that question. It's a good question. So here's where we are at with this bill, with Senate Bill 32. So the bill was introduced in the Senate. It passed its first committee in the Senate Conservation Committee by a bipartisan 7-2 vote. So that was really, really great. We've been waiting a while to get the bill scheduled for its second committee and Senate Judiciary Committee. A lot of the challenges of this virtual legislative session has meant that the process has been moving a little bit slower towards the, in the first half of the session. They're starting to move a little bit quicker now. We feel very confident that it will be scheduled. It's just a matter of time. So we're not panicking yet. We're monitoring the situation. We're in touch with everyone that we need to be in touch with. And just keep your eye out for an email alert from us or from a phone call from one of our volunteers letting you know that the bill has been scheduled and we need you to speak out. Let's see. Jenny asked, I'm just gonna maybe take one more question on the trapping bill now, and then I'll try to answer more at the end. Jenny asked, how are trappers responsible for the dogs caught in their snares and traps identified? Well, it's very challenging because one of the biggest problems that we have is that despite all of the, the regulations, and trappers like to say that trapping is very, very highly regulated. One of the regulations is that you're supposed to put your identification on the trap or snare. And not all the time, but many times that information is just missing. So without significant resources put into investigating and maybe setting up a camera to try to catch someone who might return to check that device, it's very difficult to find who those perpetrators are. I will also say that we hear often that, it's just illegal trappers, it's just poachers that are causing the problems. And that is incorrect. Many of the incidents that are reported to us and that are covered by the media, we later find out were completely legally set. They were in compliance with our rules and regulations. Okay, so I do want to mention specifically on this bill, because it's something that we've been working on for so long and we're putting a lot of resources behind it. We have an action page, apvnm.org/no traps with a capital N and a capital T. It'll bring you to this form where you'll get matched up with your legislators and you can send them a message. We also do every Wednesday at 4 p.m. we do a live update on the session and set up phone banking with our volunteers. So if you are one of our volunteers, please join us for that. If you're not a volunteer, you can sign up. There will be a brief orientation and some paperwork just to get you set up. But once you're good to go as a volunteer, then you can start joining us there. Phone banking is a really important way that we spread the word to advocates like you who want to take action and keep updated on what they're doing, but maybe they're not able to check their email all the time. Or maybe they're like all of us, and emails just kind of get lost because we get so many, right? And then finally, I'm really excited to kind of show, if you haven't seen it already, we have launched a TV ad that is running on some TV channels and digital video sources. And we're going to soon kind of really launch them on social media as well. And that is a way for you to kind of spread the word. And we're trying to get people to go to these landing pages, roxyslaw.org or trapsdon'tbelong.org, where they can stay updated, learn more, and take action. So I'm going to play the video for you all. This is one version that we've run. There's another version that is very similar.
Some things belong on New Mexico's public lands. But some things don't. Roxy was hiking with her family when a trapper snare brutally ended her life. Traps, snares, and poisons are cruel, dangerous, and don't belong on any of our public lands. Take action and learn more about Roxy's Law at roxyslaw.org.
So you can go to that, that website to learn more, share the links when you get a chance to just try to raise awareness. Okay, so some additional bills that we're working on. I just want to touch on some of the details. So Senate Bill 347 is our cage-free egg or cage-free hen bill. It requires that all large egg producers that are either producing or selling eggs for food in New Mexico, so it counts even if they're from out of state, they cannot keep their hens in cages by July 1st, 2024. That's the effective date. There is a stair-step requirement for a minimum space requirement in 2022 as well. Our sponsor is Senator Pete Campos. The cage-free facilities that would be required as a minimum standard in New Mexico under this bill are, described and defined in the bill. So cage-free doesn't mean just anything outside of a cage. It means requiring a minimum of 1 square foot if it's like an aviary type facility, or 1.5 square feet per hen in just a one-level ground floor facility. It has to provide areas for scratching and dust bathing, perches and nesting boxes for laying their eggs. These are all really important, basic, natural behaviors that is the very least that should be offered to hens in anyone's care. And this movement has been happening over many years. There has been other Western states that have passed this or similar legislation, including Colorado. And a lot of major food companies have committed to going cage-free within the next few years due to massive consumer demand. So this is a way for New Mexico to just say, yes, we are moving in this direction. And our regional egg industry, commercial egg industry, actually does support this, because there's, on the business side of things, it gives them more market predictability so that they can run their businesses well and keep their costs down and keep the retail costs down. Now, I do want to point out, cage-free is not the same thing as maybe what you might imagine is really described as pasture raised. So these hens are still kept in large indoor facilities. So a picture of a cage-free facility is on the right side of your screen there. On the left side is a facility with traditional battery cages. So the hens, there's multiple hens crammed into an individual cage. They can't walk around, they can't move, they can't stretch their wings, they can't perch. They lay their eggs in place and they drop down into a conveyor belt. So is this bill going to make all chickens' lives wonderful? No. But it is going to improve the lives of about estimated 2 million hens whose eggs come into New Mexico and are sold in our state. So it is a reformative step forward. I will mention just real quickly that if you're interested in learning more about kind of the farmed animal and food issues, Animal Protection of New Mexico has a plant-based eating program. So please check that out just to learn more about what your options are and some really, really great recipes if you do want to reduce or eliminate eggs completely from your diet. I don't want to leave this topic without mentioning that. But at least cage-free as a minimum standard, thank goodness, is the future. You can see all of the companies here that have already pledged to go cage-free by about 2024, 2025. So that is great news. And we're glad that this bill can at least help New Mexicans take that step forward to raise the floor of the welfare of animals raised for food. So this bill was heard in the Senate Conservation Committee this morning and passed by a 6-3 vote. So that's great. The next step will be the Senate Judiciary Committee. It might be some time because things have been backed up before that gets scheduled there, but we will certainly keep an eye on it and let you know when it gets scheduled. Okay. We also have Senate Bill 385, which is sponsored by Senator Brenda McKenna. Again, she's also one of the trapping bill sponsors, and Senator Pat Woods. And this bill is another revision, and we think probably the best version of this bill that's been introduced yet, to overhaul our current broken wild horse policy in this state. And we're talking about wild horses that are not protected or managed by the federal government. So many of us hear a lot about the mismanaged BLM wild horses. These are not those horses. New Mexico has its own population, various herds and bands of wild horses that live in or around different communities or different habitats. And there's very little protection for them right now, and also very little infrastructure for responsible management of those horses. The truth is that over the years, humans have altered the land, and that has impacted all wildlife, including wild horses. And we're seeing increased public conflicts, so to speak. So we're seeing communities really disagreeing about how horses in their communities should be managed. There have been vehicle collisions. There have been incidents of wild horses dying from dehydration or starvation out in the wild. And so there's a lot of humane reasons why we need to help the wild horses. We've also, and this applies for all wildlife ecosystem wide, we have really reduced the number of the few natural predators that wild horses have. So we know from best available science supported by the National Academy of Sciences that the best tool for managing wild horses is humane fertility control, namely immunocontraception with a drug called PZP. And that's something that has been used sporadically in both federal wild horses and state wild horses. And we kind of want to just take that up a notch. Let's, make that the approach for wild horses statewide in our state, but then also provide some avenues where if the land is degraded and can't sustain wild horses, how do we facilitate the creation of preserves? Maybe some of these wild horses are candidates for adoption. And so, how can we set them up for safe, loving, forever adoptive homes? We do not want these horses to be sold at auction. Because that will feed into the slaughter for consumption pipeline, and we don't want to support that. And we also know that mass removals just don't work to keep population numbers down. We need to rely on humane on-range management. And so that's where this bill takes us. It does specifically also include wild horses under the protection of our state animal cruelty statute, which was questioned by the New Mexico Court of Appeals in some litigation around these issues. The bill makes it clear that wild horses are not livestock, they're not domestic horses, and so they need to be treated differently. They need to be treated the way this special wild horse law sets out. And we just need some responsible humane management, and we need only humane outcomes for these horses. So it specifically says that you cannot sell these horses for slaughter. You cannot harm or harass them. There's a couple of strange provisions in the current law, including one where if a wild horse is captured, you need to do a DNA test. And if the DNA test shows that the horse is what would be considered a Spanish colonial horse, then it has to go to a Spanish colonial horse breeder or organization. That, it doesn't seem to make sense that we should facilitate that necessarily. It also requests that, if there's a study of the range to see if the horses can be sustained on it, that it be done by an entity that has no expertise in studying the range and the land for that animal to live on. So we're trying to replace that with workable provisions with safeguards to make sure that the horses are not mistreated. We also think that it's really important that there is a public and transparent process for communities and agencies to make decisions about how these wild horses should be managed, and that stakeholders should be able to work together to provide those common sense solutions. So this bill was also heard in its first committee this morning and passed unanimously 6-0, which we're really grateful for. I mean, this is an issue that has been very contentious for many years, and I think everyone at this point is really hungry for a workable solution. But no one wants to see harm come to the horses either. So we're hopeful for this bill. The next step is the Senate Judiciary Committee. She is in a committee right now this afternoon. She wasn't going to be able to join us, but I do have a recorded message from Senator Brenda McKenna that I want to share with you all.
Good afternoon. This is Brenda McKenna, Senator from Senate District 9. Really wish I could join you at the Animal Protection New Mexico webinar this afternoon, but I am in committee. I'm really excited, have high prospects that Roxy's Law will be the law for New Mexico, and we won't have any more traps or snares on public lands. I'm also really excited about the bill that I am co-sponsoring with Senator Woods and with Animal Protection New Mexico's help. I would really like to see it pass so that our free roaming and wild horses get the care and welfare that they so deserve. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate your care and your advocacy. Take care.
Thank you, Senator McKenna. We really appreciate you. Okay, and I know I'm taking too long, so I'm going to try to cover the next few slides pretty quickly. So the fourth and final priority bill that I want to cover is this really great bill that combines multiple positive steps forward for wildlife management. Some of the, I think, most exciting steps forward this bill takes includes something that might feel kind of basic and symbolic, but it really means so much, is changing the name of our agencies. So we currently have the Department of Game and Fish and the Game Commission. And it's been, that has kind of reflected this image of only serving New Mexicans that care about hunting and fishing and killing wildlife. And we want to change that to the Department of Wildlife Conservation and the Wildlife Conservation Commission to really reflect the breadth of New Mexicans' interest in wildlife in our state, including people who do not use or kill wildlife. We all rely on wildlife and we all enjoy wildlife. And it also similarly updates the agency's mission to include all wildlife and provides the authority for the Wildlife Conservation Commission to take action to protect additional wildlife species if they choose, based on parameters set out in the bill. Because currently the Department of Game and Fish only manages species that are listed in state law, and it's up to the state legislature to determine that. So this provides another avenue for us to be responsive and responsive to the needs of wildlife management in our state. Also, I'll point out one of the things that it does is right now the law sets out that if there's a violation of trapping laws or rules, that the commission can revoke a trapping license for a shorter amount of time than the commission can revoke a hunting or fishing license for when those rules are violated. And so we support the bill bumping up the trapping license revocation to be the same amount of time. And this will still matter even if Roxy's Law passes, because even if that bill passes, there will still be trapping on private lands and some limited public trapping that might meet the exceptions set out in Roxy's Law. So that's still really important. That bill was heard on Tuesday morning. Because it's kind of a large bill with all these different pieces, there were a couple of pieces, none of the ones that we really support. There were some pieces that we're neutral on, that a couple of senators had some problems with. And so it was tabled by a 4-4 vote in committee. But the bill has, we've been working on amendments with the sponsors and stakeholders, and that bill will come back for consideration again in committee this Saturday. So we're hopeful that the bill will be able to move forward from there. So real quickly, I just want to close with pointing out, how can you keep track of things and stay updated on what's going on as we're, I think there's 23 about 23 days left of the 60-day legislative session. So if you go to nmlegis.gov, that is the legislature's website. So a few things to point out. At the top, when you click on what's happening, that's where you can find the committees' schedules. And those are updated throughout the day, every day. When you open up those schedules, you can each committee provides information on how you can communicate your public support or opposition to a bill. So if you're wondering how you can weigh in opposition or in support of a bill, you can click on those committee schedules to find out. You can also watch the webcast. So if a committee is in session and they're hearing a bill, you can click on webcast, find the room that you're looking for in the list and click on that, and then you can watch live. If you aren't sure who your legislators are, you can also find out there. You click on legislators and then find my legislator. And then you see this page where there's the House and Senate on either side. The easiest way is to search by address. You just type in your address and then it'll pop up the picture of your state senator or your state representative, and you can click on their name for their contact information. We also publish at least roughly weekly blog updates on our website at apnm.org. So keep an eye out for that each time we publish it. We also send an email out to our email list. So keep an eye on your email inbox as well. Up at the top menu, you'll also see like a little gavel symbol. It says legislation. You can also click on legislation, and that takes you to another page where we literally just track for you. We list the progress of each bill. We have links to fact sheets. We have links to the actual bill language if you want to read more about those. So just a reminder, again, some of the really top line things you can do to help. Use and share our form at apnm.org/no-traps. So New Mexicans can reach out to their legislators, share our videos, our Roxy's Law ads, and every Wednesday at 4 p.m. is when we do live updates and phone banks. So if you check out some of Animal Protection Voters' latest email alerts, if you've received those, we include links to them when we share our blogs. Or you can email us at info@apnm.org and find out what's going on, and we can send you more information on becoming a volunteer. Thank you so much for spending this hour with me. I will stick around for a while to answer questions if I can. It really means a lot to all of us, and I know it means a lot to the animals that you all are engaged in this process. You want to help, you're staying up to date. You know, we know now, maybe more than before, just how rare and precious life is, and how important it is to be kind to each other, and that includes to animals. So thank you for joining with us. That's the end of my presentation. I'm going to turn to some questions, and I'll just work my way through them. If you haven't typed in a question yet, feel free to type it in now. If there's anything that I don't get to, by the time Dorothea wants to kick me off the Zoom, we will record all of the questions, and I will follow up with you via email to answer them for you. So no worries. Ralph asked, I think maybe this was about the trapping bill. Are we going concurrently with the House? So asking, is there a House version of the bill this year? No, so it's just the Senate bill, just Senate Bill 32. We thought about, you know, maybe we could run a Senate bill and a House bill at the same time. We've done that before on different issues, but we knew that with the virtual legislative session, there was going to be already a slower process and kind of a bottleneck with the number of bills being introduced. That's one of the reasons why actually on the House side, they imposed a limit on the number of bills that each state representative could sponsor. So we are just running Senate Bill 32 on the trapping bill. Okay, Paige asked, with Senate Bill 312, the Wildlife Heritage Act, possibly back on the table. So this is the wildlife, the big wildlife bill that's going to be back and heard again in Senate Conservation on Saturday. Do you know what the new amendments might be? Can bills be amended throughout the legislative process? Yes, so bills can absolutely be amended throughout the legislative process. The amendments that I'm aware of are not any of the ones that we really have a position, a support position on. One of the provisions in the bill where we've taken a neutral position has been regarding elk hunting licenses in the state. The state law dictates how that needs to be split between residents and out-of-state non-residents. And then for out-of-state non-residents, there's a set aside for how many must be contracted with a outfitter or hunting guide. So this is kind of more, there's a big coalition supporting this big bill, and it does include some hunting advocacy groups. So this is one of the provisions that they were really prioritizing. We took a neutral position because it doesn't really increase or reduce the number of elk killed in our state by hunters. It's just a question of, are they killed by in-state hunters or by out-of-state hunters? But there was controversy about whether or not the state should get rid of that outfitter and guide set aside. And so I think that provision is being taken out of the bill. So everything that we really, really support is still intact in the bill. So we are grateful for that. Francis, hi Francis, says pet owners should keep their dogs on a leash until this bill, I think the trapping bill, has passed to save the pet from terrible injury and vet costs. Thank you for that comment. So, I think it is important for all New Mexicans and visitors to New Mexico to consider, taking more seriously leashing your dogs when you're hiking out in the wilderness. That dogs even go and will chase off wildlife. Dogs might trample, really sensitive plant life in the area. There are certainly reasons to keep your dogs on a leash anyway. I will say that keeping your dog on a leash does not protect you from running into a trap, snare, or poison. And that is because the trapping regulations require that traps and snares need to be set 75 feet away from trails. But it only counts if it's a marked trail on the map. And anyone who has gone out into, New Mexico's public lands, that there are going to be situations where you kind of want to get off trail. Maybe it's to take a bathroom break. Maybe it's because there's an outlook over there. Maybe you see something. Maybe you just want to wander. Maybe you follow a path that's actually been created by wildlife in the area. A lot of wildlife will tend to walk along the same path over and over, and it creates, a dirt path, but it's not a marked trail. And so the trapping setbacks do not apply to those trails. One of the biggest advocates that we work with behind this bill is Mary Catherine Ray, who is the wildlife chair for the Rio Grande Sierra Club. And her dog she was hiking with her dog on leash on one of those trails. People call them game trails, that wildlife create. And there was a trap set right in the middle of the trail and her dog got caught. And even though she's been working on this issue for many, many years and knows how to open a trap, it still took her a full minute of trying to release her screaming, thrashing dog from that trap. And both did experience some minor injuries from that experience. So yes, it's a great idea to keep your dog on a leash. Leash laws do not cancel out the need to pass Roxy's law. So I just want to make that clear. Let's see. Jenny asked if the trapping bill, if violations are a misdemeanor, would that mean that a trapper can be sued civilly? So this bill doesn't speak directly to that. You know, I think there, I think it's a question and certainly an opportunity that someone could explore if, for instance, their dog has been injured by a trap and they can find who the trapper is, and the dog, let's say, suffered injuries. You had to take your dog to a vet and you had $1,000 vet bill. There is an avenue there to sue the trapper to recover the money that you spent on that. But this bill doesn't speak directly to that. But you know, that might be an option. I'm not aware of that having actually happened yet, at least in New Mexico. Jenny asked, what would the cost of PZP, the fertility control contraception, cost for wild horses? Wow. I know this, but it's not at the top of my head. I don't know if any of my colleagues who are definitely steeped, I see Noelle. I don't know if Noelle, you want to text me. She's definitely steeped in wild horse issues, especially on the federal level. I can say affirmatively that when you look at the population control options, PZP contraception is the most cost-effective option we have. There are areas in the state, even with federal wild horses, where over the years, the federal government has removed hundreds and hundreds of horses to try to keep those populations down, and the populations just continue to increase. It's only when you apply immunocontraception that you can actually control and keep those population levels down. So I don't know the exact cost, but I know that when you compare it to the other options, it is affordable. And I see that we're at 5 o'clock now. So again, if you have any other questions, please reach out to us. I'm happy to answer them with a quick email. And thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so very much, Jessica, for keeping us informed and for laying out what happens next in the session. This was so informative. And for all of you out there, we have recorded this session and we'll make the recording available to anyone who registered afterwards. And thank you so very much for taking the time to be here with us today. And we hope you have a great evening. Goodbye.